What's up? It's Andrea. Today, we see the incredible conclusion to last week's episode. The Riker Curse continues, and we ask the question, would it be worse to be killed on duty or to be assimilated by the Borg? Stay tuned.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese. I am so excited. Season 4, Episode 1, the stunning conclusion to Best of Both Worlds. It's Locutus of Borg. It's Captain Riker.
Oh, so good.
So everything. Good. It's everything.
Yeah, I have to say that I remember this episode, the last week's episode. I remember how I felt at that cliffhanger. I remember holding my breath. I remember being like, I thought they were going to resolve everything in the last 5 minutes. And I kept thinking, oh, how are they going to resolve this? I wonder how they're going to resolve this. And then the captain's gone. I'm like, okay, I wonder how they're going to find him. Because the away team, you think for sure they're going to capture him and like just go back and run away or something. But no, he turns into a Borg and then Riker says fire. And I remember being like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I was like amped to watch this conclusion of the story. And I don't remember at all how I felt watching the conclusion as a kid, but I will say watching it as an adult, I like this episode better than the last episode. It just had everything I wanted in Trek in this episode.
Okay, I agree with you completely. Unfortunately, the writer of this episode, Michael Piller, and the director, Cliff Bull, both have said that despite the fact that this episode was widely viewed as like the best cliffhanger resolution in television history, they felt like they kind of let the team down a little bit. They were like, episode 1 was just so great. And episode 2 was like, and like, I'm with you. Like, I think episode 1 is fantastic. And it's this like kick-ass buildup, but like the buildup is nothing without the solution. And we've got like a little bit of everything. We're aboard a Borg ship. There's a change of command. You see the like leftovers of like some
graveyard
massacre. We get sick bay. We get
we get Data's lab. Again, we haven't seen this lab since Lol.
Yeah.
It just has everything. It was a great episode. Yeah. And the first one there was the slow burn. It was a slow buildup, but this one, it's just like thing after thing after thing. And you don't know how they're going to win. There just seems to be no winning. And I love a good Trek episode where you don't know how it's going to work out.
Yes.
Even when you've seen it before, you're like, but how did they get out of that sticky situation? Which is how I felt watching this. I was like, how did they do this again?
I'm so glad that you brought this up because I do love a no-win situation. And then suddenly there's a solution. You're like, I really did not see that coming. It's interesting that you say that because TNG had borrowed, at least in season 1, so many storylines from the original series. And it was all a drunk virus or a virus or like a bacteria
space virus
or an electricity virus or like some shit like that. It's like, God damn it. Right. This is the first episode of season 4. The original series only ran 3 seasons. So at this point, we have reached this like threshold that TNG is now eclipsing the original series in like length. And I think that it's like, I just think it's so great. And I wrote, no more borrowing drunk viruses.
Right. Now we have to come up with our own material. And this is well done. And I also noticed, just kind of scanning over what's to come, I think because this 2-part finale was so freaking popular that they just decided to do a 2-part finale for all of the rest of the seasons.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, oh,
and for sweeps like in the middle of the seasons too.
Yeah. I was like, oh, they're doing this again, huh? Oh, and they're doing it again. But they never get to the greatness of this. And they even try to do another season finale with Borg I feel like to maybe be like, see this one, it's the one with Data and Lore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that one was like, it just kind of felt like, it just sort of felt like beige corduroy. Okay, it was all right, but it wasn't
good, but it wasn't
not groundbreaking. Right? Yeah.
None of them were this. And I feel like that's a little bit sad because it just feels to me like it was like, let's redo what we did. That was so great. And like, you just can't compete with Picard being turned into a Borg. Like no storyline is going to touch that emotionally, and having Riker have to shoot his own captain. Like,
yes. And you like never get a second chance at first impression. So the first time that the away team is on the cube and Beverly spots Picard and you just see his profile and he looks mostly human. And then when he turns and you see all the Borg implants, like Beverly's look is exactly our look where we're like, oh shit, it's like, oh my God.
Because we didn't know
Picard
at
has
this
been made
point
into a Borg. Yeah.
that assimilation was a thing. We just knew the Borg were destructive and blew stuff up.
Yes. And just scooped away stuff.
Scooped away stuff. And we never knew what happened to the stuff they scooped away.
Yes.
And now you're like, this is kind of worse than death. If they capture you, you become a zombie. So it's better to be blown out of the sky than to be captured.
Yes. And I was thinking about that too, because as we see later, there's a moment where we see Locutus of Borg having a tear running down the side of his face. And you're like, somewhere in there, Picard is in agony and is powerless against it. And I was thinking, God, if I were Borg, I'd be like jumping out of the airlock if I could, just to end it. It's so terrible. Well, let's just jump in. Okay. So I want to say this is the first time in Star Trek that we get a 2-part, right? And Majel Barrett is the most amazing voice of TNG. She really is. As much as I don't like Lwaxana as a character,
she crushes it as the computer.
She really does. She absolutely does. And it starts off, the episode opens with previously on, and then it's got the whole build up. And then Majel Barrett says, and now the conclusion. And it's just so
everything.
Good.
It's everything. I love when she's
good.
And you know what? I can't even say that I don't like Majel Barrett as Lwaxana. I think I can't imagine anyone else being Lwaxana.
You're right.
I still like Lwaxana.
Yes.
But Majel Barrett, you do a great job in that role as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing can touch that computer voice. Like that is so iconic. That voice alone is like the heartbeat of Trek.
Yes, right? It really is.
Where do you go without the Enterprise? You have to have that computer.
The ambient sound aboard the Enterprise, the warp core, and Majel Barrett as the computer voice, especially saying, and now the conclusion is like chicken soup for my soul. It's like ultimate nerd comfort food for my soul. It really is. So I'm going to give you the 4 bullet point previously on.
Okay.
The Borg have arrived in the Alpha Quadrant. They've taken Picard and assimilated him into the Borg. Commander Shelby is the Borg task force leader and comes aboard and ruffles Riker's feathers as she continues to just kick ass. And then Riker has to make the hard call at the end and fire upon the Borg with Picard along with them. So with Picard assimilated by the Borg, Riker is forced to go one-on-one with his former captain. Like that's our previously on.
So picking it right up, the screen comes on and they're like fire. They discharge the weapon, which causes a ton of damage to the Enterprise, which they already knew was going to happen. But in exchange for blowing up the cube, it's worth it. Like whatever. They weren't going to die. I mean, it was just going to burn out all their systems. They weren't going to be able to pursue them.
Except that when they fire the weapon and keep firing it and keep firing it, and the Enterprise is breaking down piece by piece by piece, the cube is like, that's all you got. Yes. And you're just like, whoa. It's like a butterfly trying to beat its wings as hard as possible to blow me away. And it's like ripping its wings apart. And I'm like, oh, there's a butterfly around? Like,
yes. And Locutus is just staring. I mean, their ship, the cube isn't even rocked a little bit, like it would be with a big force field. Yeah.
Not even a little of the like
tractor beam or something, nothing. And then they're like, Riker's like, what is going on? There's no way that they've adapted that fast. We literally I just said fire. There's no way. And then that's when we discover perhaps the worst part of this whole Borg assimilation situation. Where Locutus, formerly known as Picard, says, we have assimilated Picard and all of his knowledge. So they knew that the weapon was going to be fired and they knew exactly how to combat it before it was even fired. And the Enterprise just did this for nothing.
Yes, they burned themselves up for nothing. And I got to say, the most climactic moment in Star Trek for me of ever is Mr. Worf fire with that buildup we had last week. The most anticlimactic resolution is the deflector shield goes and nothing happens. And then they just stare and they go, what happened? I'm like, that's it? That's it. I remember as a kid watching this for the first time being like, that was it? We waited like 4 months for this. Like deflector.
And you're like, shit. There's not even like a scratch on that cube. We're expecting some explosions or something. It was like, didn't even get rocked. And you're like, Then you find out that, wow, okay, so they know everything Picard knows, including, which this is what they use later on with the Borg, especially in Voyager. I don't remember so much in TNG, but when people get assimilated, they also have all of their security codes. And so they can like hack right into your computer, like hack right into the computer of the Enterprise if they wanted to, take over all the ship's controls using Picard's like access codes and stuff. I mean, they could do all kinds of stuff. But here, all they're doing is just like kind of just protecting themselves against the beam and then just being like, okay, back to what we were doing. Anyways, and you're just like,
yes.
uh-oh.
Yes.
So
yeah.
now what? That was literally their only weapon.
Yes. And the Borg is like, we've been able to prepare for all possible attacks. It's like, well, shit, So they take off and the Enterprise is like limping around, right? Like trying to get itself up and running. And we get the senior staff meeting and Admiral Hansen says, we have prepared, this big defensive
armada.
Yes, at Wolf 359, we've got 40 plus ships, 11,000 some odd personnel.
And we're going to make our stand there. That's what we're going to do. And Riker's like, we have no weapons. Like, they're just like, oh, well, we're going to make our stand there.
We're sitting ducks. Yeah.
We're going to defend as much as we can, try to protect Earth from over there, and Godspeed.
Yes. And they have to stay behind to do, the Enterprise has to stay behind to do these repairs.
Because
and
they literally can't move.
Because they blew out their whole system with that goddamn deflector shield that did nothing. Anyway, but I love that Riker's like, the Enterprise will be there. Like, we might be a little late to the party, but we'll be there. And I love just that determination. And Admiral Hansen is like, oh yeah, one last thing real quick, because Picard is a casualty of this war or this battle. And after talking about like how remarkable of a human like Picard was, he's like, Riker, I'm giving you a field promotion to captain of the Enterprise. And it's kind of that moment that Riker has always wanted. And in the worst possible situation, he never wanted it like this. And it just made me super sad.
It's kind of like Worf, right? Taking over for Yar when she died from the smoke, from Armis, from the tar monster. And then later on, who else died that he was supposed to take over for them, but then they didn't really die? Didn't that happen twice?
It probably did.
No, I don't know, whatever. But the point is, because I remember we had this conversation where Troy was like, you're taking over for somebody again who's died.
Yes, but it was Worf taking over for Data, who they thought Data was dead, but the Collector had got him for Kim Spajo had him.
Okay,
there we
like,
go.
Who died? Yeah,
that was itching my brain. I'm like, wait, I know there's something there. Yeah,
right. But it's kind of like that where Worf never wanted to be promoted by having his colleagues die. That was never the intention. It's just an unfortunate circumstance. And we know Riker's been offered command 3 times and has not taken it because he doesn't want to leave the Enterprise. And now he has to take command. But we also find that he's 100% ready for it, which is how he was doubting himself last episode. Can I make the big decisions? Do I really want leadership?
Yes.
And now he's put in charge and he's a freaking epic captain.
Yeah. Yeah, he really is. He really is. He just takes charge and he's ready to get down with the Borg. Now we jump into the Borg cube and Locutus is lying there getting his modifications. And I love that there's this little beam that comes and like interfaces with one of his interfaces on his head. And then did you notice that his skin turned gray like instantly? Like he was kind of grayish as Locutus before, but it was like his skin color was totally dialed down. It was so cool.
No, I didn't notice that.
You didn't notice that? Oh my God. There were a couple of things I noticed that were Borg related. And I was like, oh, that is really cool. Yeah. I noticed his skin got like 8 shades grayer. I was like, whoa, like they just turned that off, I guess. And then we have that tear running like down the side of his face. And I was like, oh my God, because Picard has, against his will, had all of his knowledge and clearance codes and everything from Starfleet taken. And now the Borg have it. Recording paused. Everything good?
Yeah, I think they're like knocking to be like, hey, but then I don't quite hear it.
Oh, okay.
And then they just like leave.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you were saying,
yeah, like Picard is lying there and he's just got this tear running down his face and it just breaks my heart for him. Like this has got to be the most traumatic experience you could ever go through. And I just, oh God, my heart just broke for Picard because it's not Locutus that's crying, it's Picard.
Right. And the thing that I noticed is when they put that really cool glove on his hand,
that
has all the little things. Yeah. So here they just
pieces.
showed him like just kind of like making a fist and they slid it onto his arm, which looks so dope.
Yeah.
But in the future, when they describe this assimilation, is they actually chop off people's arms to make those attachments, and you see. When people get rescued from the Borg and they take those off, it's just like a little stump underneath.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate how the Borg evolve over the course of this show and over the course of Voyager and over the course of the movies, and how they just become bigger and badder, because even without all that evolution, they're still like the most terrifying enemy. They are so scary. They are. They're so scary. And then they just keep making them just a little bit more realistic and a little bit worse.
Yes. Okay. I love that you mentioned that, because I did find some concept artwork from this production. And it was originally the idea to have Patrick Stewart kind of like put his arm kind of like down his sleeve and behind him, and then have this cybernetic arm that when Data later in the episode like has that battle of strength with him, like breaks the whole thing off, not just the little control knob, but like breaks the arm in half. Yeah. So I was like, oh wow. But I love that they have these ideas that they're like, we can't flesh them out right now, but like for later we should, that's what life is.
For later we should figure it out. And then later they figure it out and you're like, oh my gosh. And then they tease out later, like in Voyager, when one of the Borgs that they rescue, we find out that she remembers exactly what it felt like to be assimilated.
Oh my God.
And she's assimilated thousands, and she knew at the time what it felt like for them, because she remembers going through it. And because they're Borg, they remember everything. And we hear that at the end of this episode when Picard's like, I remembered everything. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, it's like the torture never stops. These are some formidable bad guys, I have to say.
Yes. And now the Enterprise is still disabled, and engineering team is running all manner of tests to get things back up and running. And Commander Shelby is kind of heading things up. And she mentions that 2 engineers are sort of running final tests, and she mentions it just in passing, but she's like, Lieutenant so-and-so and Lieutenant Barclay are running final tests. And I was like, oh, Barclay's still aboard the ship.
And I noticed that too. I was like,
couldn't the Borg just take him? Because if they'd assimilated him, they'd turn into this like useless, bumbling pile of machines with overwhelming social anxiety. And then they would cease to be the biggest threat in the universe, and then just recede into their own holodeck. And I was like, man, poor Barclay.
Poor Barclay. Yeah, I like that little honorable mention as well. I'm like, okay,
Barclay's
he's just like O'Brien, you just give him a little shout out from time to time. You don't need to see his face all the time.
No, I don't.
That was a nice touch.
I certainly don't.
So Shelby is very sure of herself, as always. Nothing has changed her. And she's just like, yeah, Riker. So you know what? Because he says something to her that's like a compliment. And she's like, yes, good enough to be your first officer. Like she just totally brings it up again. And he's just like, man, you are super ambitious. And, she's almost like, thank you, sir. Yes, I am, sir. But he's like, and you have a lot to learn. And she's like, it's just totally humbled. Like, you're right. I do. And then he says, and so did I. And Picard reminded me of that. So like, I will actually consider you. I'm not just straight up shutting you down, but I'm also not saying yes. And it was just very like, I don't know. I just really feel like Riker's a really good leader.
He is a fantastic leader, and he doesn't become captain for another number of years of a different ship, but he has what it takes. Now, I love in this scene, he's already got his like 4th pip, which is super cool. And I was like, there it is. I just love it so much. Now, Starfleet ends up reporting that they have engaged with the Borg at Wolf 359. And Admiral Hansen,
not going well.
It's not going well. Hansen is like, it's very choppy communication. They're like, we're going to have to like retreat and regroup. And like, and Crusher is asked how long it'll take to get there. And it's like, 27 hours or something hugely ridiculous. It's like, like we're not going to make it. And so
I think it's like 2 hours, but still,
is it? Okay.
Yeah. They said it'll be 2 to 3 hours before they can join them, but they're fighting now. Like,
yes, right now,
2 to 3 hours. It might as well be a year.
Yes. And it's 40 ships, 40 plus Federation starships.
And as
like,
Hansen's
this is
reporting,
really big.
You see his ships like getting hit, and like the screen's all shaky and wobbly. It looks like original series going on in there.
Yes.
And then the communication's just cut off. So you're like, yeah, he doesn't have 2 to 3 more minutes.
Yes,
probably.
Absolutely. So they're like, okay, repairs warp 9, and like, let's get this up and running. So they finally are able to like get themselves into high warp, and they're warping as fast as they can to Wolf 359. And in the observation lounge, I love that Captain Riker, which is kind of it's like, feels weird for me to say, but Captain Riker ends up making Shelby his first officer officially. And I love that his reasoning is like, she's the Borg tactical like expert, and I need everybody at the posts that they know how to do well, because this is really a live or die moment. So I need you where you're used to being. And I really, really like that Shelby's role in Best of Both Worlds Part 1 was really to like ruffle feathers and be kind of grating. And I love that she isn't at all in this episode. Like she's really stepping into the role that she's been like super ambitiously trying to get at. And I dig it. I dig it.
And she still has that ambition. She still has that drive. She still has that let's have a crazy idea. But she's not, but she's playing she's coloring within the lines. You know, she's definitely taking charge, but she's not being rude or anything, which is really nice. It's like, okay, so she can handle it also. Good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I will point out Beverly comes up with this idea, and maybe this is where you got the time frame from.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Beverly comes up with this idea of creating these destructive nanites that they can somehow, we don't know how, introduce into the Borg. And because they're a collective, it'll infect all of the Borg. And this is actually something that in Voyager happens a couple times, where there's something that infects the Borg, and they try it, and it usually just affects a single cube, and then the cube self-destructs or whatever. And it doesn't ultimately take down the entire Borg, but it's a great idea. Unfortunately, it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to make these nanites, let alone how it's going to be deployed. And like we said earlier, we don't have 2 to 3 minutes. Like we just don't have time for it. But it is a great idea.
I love that Troy points out like nanites might be the only thing left of the Federation in 2 to 3 weeks, which wasn't supposed to be snarky, but just highlight like the urgency
and how sad that is.
Yeah. And I love that idea. Now, okay, Shereese, possibly one of the best moments of the entire episode is when Guinan comes to visit Riker. And although he's like, Guinan, it's not the good time, she just walks right in. She's like, I'm kind of just used to having the captain's ear. And then she sits in the captain's chair, which
so great.
Only from Guinan would be seen as not disrespectful. She is not disrespecting the chair. She's just talking to Riker as an equal. And she says, you have to let go of Picard. If he died, it would be easier, but he didn't. They took him from us one piece at a time. And she goes on to say that our relationship is beyond friendship, beyond family, and I will let him go. Like, you have to let him go, because people who are certain that they're about to die have a way of kind of making that come true. Like, you have to let him go. I was just like, watching that scene.
That was
what
great.
were your thoughts on that?
That was so great. And then she gets up to leave and says, by the way, that's your chair now. Because when he came in, he was terrified to sit in it. I mean, he could sit in the captain's chair on the bridge all day long because he does it as a first officer whenever Picard's off of the bridge. But sitting in his chair in his ready room, he has never done that before. But to see Guinan do it so casually, and then to have her say, and by the way, that's your chair, like, sit in it. And then having him sit in it was so powerful. And yeah, you know, I will say though, one thing that does disappoint me is that they had all this mystery about Picard and Guinan and their original meeting, and this line that she says right here of closer than family, closer than friends, whatever, does not get actualized when we finally see how they did meet. It was such an incredible letdown. I think they should have always left that to be a mystery, because the way she talked about it, and it's clear that at this point they hadn't written that how they met, and they hadn't decided how that story was going to go, or if they were ever going to reveal it. I think leaving it a mystery the same way Guinan's people are a mystery would have been a better call, because then we could just be like, I don't know, they're super close. No one knows why. Because when you actually see the episode where they meet, you're just kind of like, this does not inspire this depth of devotion and loyalty and blah, blah, blah. It just doesn't. So that was a little sad, only because I know the answer to that, but like at the time you don't. So you're just like, ooh, what happened between them exactly?
I know, because she had kind of this little smirk, and I was like, were they lovers at some
exactly
point?
Were they lovers? What? That's the only other option of relationship, right? That we didn't cover with family, friends.
Right? Or bonus. Yeah, exactly. I was like, must be bonus. So Riker is like finally realizing like, I really do need to let this man go. And he gets calmed to say like, we've arrived at Wolf 359, and they find nothing but complete destruction. All of the ships have been destroyed. 11,000 plus servicemen and women and service children have been killed, including Admiral Hansen. He's gone.
service children.
Why do you have
kids on your ship?
This is why you leave a note. Okay.
Yes.
This is why you don't have kids aboard a ship like this. So Admiral Hansen is gone, and a couple of things. The production wanted to do the battle However, because of budgetary constraints, and they just had sunk so much money into
the Borg, probably
special effects.
Holy cow.
Yes. I was doing some background reading, and they did 80 plus practical effects in this episode alone, or in these 2 episodes alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it just took up so much time and so much money that they're like, we don't have the money for it. So I did see the super cool behind the scenes photo of just kind of a broken chunk of a warp nacelle and a little engineering section that's been battle blasted and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a prop house. So they're kind of painting it and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is so freaking cool. It's just amazing. Now, one little side note, I'm going to say the Riker conspiracy continues, Shereese, because one of the ships destroyed is the Melbourne, which he was offered command of. And I was like, see, every time a ship is offered up to Riker, something fucked up happens to that ship.
If the Riker Curse, I don't even know.
The Riker Curse. If I were on a ship and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we might be getting Captain Riker," I'd be like, "Let me just go ahead and put in for my transfer right now."
Exactly. Yep. Peace out, yo. Nice knowing you. Nice knowing you. That's all I need to know is just that it was offered to him, not that he said he was going to take it. Nope. Just the offer alone is a death sentence.
That's enough. That is enough for me. I love that so much. So the Riker conspiracy continues. Okay, so at this point in the episode, Riker and Shelby are kind of talking options because they're like, Jesus Christ, this is a graveyard. Mm-hmm. And also all the effects of the little sparks and the fires and the explosions kind of continuing. And 40 something ships versus 1 Borg cube. And this was their fate. It was holy shit. Mm-hmm. So they're like, all right. Here's the problem. Picard knows us sometimes better than we know ourselves. Mm-hmm. So he knows all the he knows all the possibilities of what kind of plans we could come up with. So now we need to start thinking wildly out of the box because they are going to be prepared for everything.
Right. Which is a good thing that they have Shelby on board because she's all about thinking outside of the box.
Yes, she really is. So they do this saucer separation, and
Riker, which I think is our 3rd time seeing the saucer separation.
I think it is.
Maybe it's our also last time seeing the saucer separation. We'll see as we go on, but I don't think it happens after this.
I love the idea so much that the starship can separate into 2 pieces. Remember in the pilot episode, it was what? This ship can separate.
And then in the other episode, when Geordi did it, it was what? It was so cool.
I keep forgetting that it can do that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That's why when she did it this time, I was just like, oh shoot, they did it a 3rd time. I didn't even remember. Yeah. And then I thought, and then Shelby was like, sir, can I remind you that Picard was briefed on that? So he's going to expect it. And Riker's like, I hope so. But so it's Riker used that against him. But at the same time, little part of me was going, yeah, well, he wouldn't know if he wouldn't have gone over Riker's head and briefed him on it. When Riker told you not to, then he wouldn't know that was your trick. A little part of me was like,
this is why you don't. Yeah, this is why you respect the chain of command, Shelby. God damn it.
Let me just remind you, sir, he was briefed. We know he was briefed.
We know who briefed him too, also.
But unlike me, Riker is not petty. So he's just like, yeah, I know that. And we're going to use that to our advantage, which I thought was genius.
Yeah, he does use this to his advantage. And I really love it. So they separate the ship, and Riker takes a star drive and tells Locutus that he's prepared to surrender, and we just need a little bit of time to prepare.
And did you notice the view screen on the Borg cube was also a cube?
No. Yes, it was.
It was 4 screens in a square,
angled. Yeah,
and it was just rotating.
I did notice that. That was super cool.
So dope.
You're just all about that cube shape, man. They are really all about that cube. Great. But yeah, so he's like, come on, Locutus, you know that Picard would trust me implicitly. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling you, we're going to prepare for surrender. And I love that they've got this sneaky little plan. Mm-hmm. So the saucer section starts firing this antimatter spread that's basically creating a smoke screen where Worf and Data can take a little tiny shuttle wearing really cool armbands and kind of bobble around, go in, burst of energy, and then cut engines, and then they can kind of drift into
slip past the net.
Yes. Super cool. And by the way, the shuttle penetrates the Borg antimatter field, and Data and Worf beam aboard the cube. Number 1, this is the first time we've ever seen in Star Trek that shuttles can have transporters, transporting capability, because we've never seen it before. It's the first time.
That's cool. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And now that you mention it, the whole point of having a shuttle was when you can't just transport to the ship.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really
Exactly.
good point. What I thought was weird was when he like clicked the emergency
Mhm.
transporter, he clicked it in the ceiling, and I was like, huh, what's that? Since when has that been there? I don't remember seeing that before. That was more my thought.
It
But yeah,
never
you're
was.
right. Transporting out of a shuttle, like that's
First
super
time.
neat. Super
First
neat.
time. And by the way, I love because the shuttle is so tiny, you don't have space to put a transport pad. So it's just like a
Yep.
little thing in a seat. It's kind of like a dome light in your car. Like it
Yep.
doesn't take up a lot of space, but it's there. Now they're able to get into the Borg cube
The
and
exact location of Locutus, which is handy.
which is totally handy because one of the ensigns was like, I can get you within 30 meters. It's like, okay. So they find him. And by the way, this bothered me. They start firing at the Borg, and the first two Borgs that they fire at go down quickly. And I was like, okay, so the third one's going to have like the shield.
Yeah, they're going to adapt.
They don't. It's like pew, 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 and pew, pew. Like they all just go down. It's like, what?
The last two should have adapted, and they should have had to change their phaser settings.
They really should have. But
and also,
whatever.
Locutus should have resisted and not just try to hit Worf over the head with his really big arm. He should have like fired. Or
why
something.
wasn't Data the one running in to fight this like cyborg? Why do you always have Worf in there? Worf is strong, but not that strong. When you need someone who's strong, but not strong enough, you send Worf in every time.
When you need somebody who's like strong adjacent, like the cousin of strong,
like
you send in Worf.
tangentially strong. You send Worf in. And then when you need actual strong, you've got Data coming calm and cool.
Word.
Like
in any case, Data sneaks in to give the little hypospray shot that knocks out Locutus, and they kidnap him back. And it was kind of like, you still are captain, we still him back.
Yeah,
so they kidnap him, and
they did a take backs.
they sure did. And then from back in the back of the shuttle, they just clicked like a button, and they were like, "Get us out of here!" And they hit the forward button or whatever from back in the back of the shuttle, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
I do like
kind of like a panel. So like all the buttons control all of the things.
I do like that, how in Trek, like all the buttons or any panel can control anything, even though part of me feels like it's like maybe a little bit lazy. The other part of me is like, but how like efficient is this that you could be anywhere and still be running your ship? Like I would want that power if I had a ship and I knew how to do stuff. I would want to be able to like,
if
do
you
the
have a
important
Roga
stuff from anywhere.
Danar taking over like the bridge, you could be in a hallway panel and just go like Picard authorization Alpha 01 or whatever.
And lock him out of the bridge.
Yeah, you've got everything right there from a comm panel. It is pretty cool. And they get aboard the Enterprise in the nick of time because the Borg detect the shuttle and fire at it. And of course, we have the age-old transporter trick where the fucking ship explodes and yet they still beam aboard like a few seconds later and they like just made it. And I gotta say, we see smug Riker. Did you notice that shot where they're like, we got him? And then Riker's looking so pleased with himself. And I was like, woo, this is like sexy Riker looking like so smug and pleased with himself. I was like, okay.
That's funny.
That's
funny that you think that smugness is sexy. That's kind of funny.
I don't, but I think that shot of Riker is like, he's pretty hot. Like he's pretty hot. He's looking like very proud of himself and like rightfully so. Cause I want to see a t-shirt with the Borg and them taking Locutus and then being like, hey, no take backs.
Yep, totally. You should make that meme. I love the battle bridge. It just looks so dope. Like it's just so cool. It's like different colors, different shapes.
It's very Spartan too. It's like, it's a battle bridge. There's no comfort to it.
It's amazing. Like the set design, every penny that they spent on designing the set and doing the costuming and the makeup for the Borg was money well spent. Beautiful episode.
Yes. Now aboard the Enterprise, the cube just like jumps back into warp and heads towards Earth. They're like, whatever.
Right.
Whatever
They're just like, keep him. We got others.
Whatever with you guys. Yeah. We have many of these.
Which by the way, makes no sense. They could have easily just destroyed them like they did that whole armada like 10 minutes ago. But for some reason, they leave the Enterprise to go about their business.
Yeah. There was an entire graveyard of 40 fucking Federation ships, like big and bad ships, but like the star drive in the saucer section going pew, 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 with like antimatter, like in sparks and a little teeny tiny shuttle. Like that was enough. The Borg would have been like pew, and that would have been that.
Right. I mean, they could have so easily blown them up because neither ship really had any weapons that could do anything anyways.
Nothing.
Did they even have any weapons left? Because they said fire at will. and they're all separated. Like, it's just so easy for you to be like, pew, pew, and then keep going. But instead they keep
like
going on their journey.
Kind of like the little Mars defense perimeter where these 3 little ships came out and they're like, pew, pew, pew.
That was really sad. And they were just like,
first patrol.
Yeah. They're like, Jupiter has just spotted them. And they're like, Saturn has just spotted or whatever. And then they're like, yep, the Mars defense. And it was like, pew, 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 they're done. And you're just like, okay, they're just at Earth now at this point. Like nothing stopped them. Yeah.
Nothing. So aboard the Enterprise, Locutus is unconscious in sickbay, and Beverly says the Borg are like rewriting his DNA, and they revive him, and he is like speaking for the Borg. And this was interesting to me. For
some reason, he's a super docile Borg.
Yes, because he says, I speak for the Borg. This is the first time I've ever heard a Borg say I, not we. He says, I mean you no harm, which I was like, but you do. Okay. And also I thought in like Ultra HD, that makeup close up looks really rough. I was like, ooh, I can see all the stickies and the extra everything. I was like, ooh. It looked so much cooler on the ship's view screens. But again, this was 1990. Now they discover that the Borg can control Picard via the subspace communication that kind of looks like a transporter. It uses sort of transporter-ish technology because, they just keep assimilating like different technologies. And they're like, we need to separate the man from the machine. And isn't it convenient that we have a machine on board that can maybe communicate with the machine part of the man, which I thought was really, really cool.
Literally
cool.
No other ship could have done that.
Yep.
And Data, takes one for the team and is like, yeah, just like hook me up to him. So it's like, it's not even like there's some kind of, I don't know, adapter or buffer or some little safe space between them that you could turn the button off in case it gets crazy.
Shereese, I have like 6 effing connections from the microphone for podcasting to my laptop because I need like an Apple adapter and then a fucking whatever USB other something else adapter and then like this other thing. But I guess in the 21st century, they're like right into my positronic net and there we go.
And these three things here go right here and we're good. You're just like, oh, okay. So we're in Data's lab and we've got Data hooked up to Locutus and he's using his brain to access the Borg's collective brain and discovers Picard's also in there somewhere, but he's not accessing Picard. He can only access the Borg.
But using Troy, like for her abilities, like she can sense when Picard comes back. Isn't that using people
where
for
they belong.
The roles? Yes.
So he's got O'Brien there to monitor his systems, which I'm okay with because Wesley and Geordi are probably trying to like save the ship.
Yes, but because they specifically mentioned that the monitor system that the Borg use for control behaves like a transporter. So they're like, well, it's going to get the transporter chief.
You're totally right. You're totally right. And then we've got Beverly monitoring vital signs.
Everybody's doing their job.
You've got Troy monitoring if Picard's like spirit comes back or soul or consciousness comes back, which is just like, again, fantastic leadership. Well done, Data. Everyone's doing what they are best at doing. Now we feel like there's maybe a little bit of hope.
There is.
He goes through, there's like three firewalls or something to get through to the Borg hive mind. And he goes through firewall 1. It's like nothing happens. He goes through firewall 2. Nothing happens. He goes through firewall 3. And then all of a sudden Locutus starts jerking and like trying to break stuff. And you're like,
and Data's going processing. I just thought that was super cool. Super cool. And yes, he realizes that like the Borg control everything by root commands. So yeah, Locutus does start breaking out or trying to break out. And of course they get like this poor ensign stuntman who like, hold on. And then Locutus just launches him over like a railing where there doesn't even need to be a railing. And we get the Data super strength that we love seeing. And he like breaks the tip of his cybernetic arm with all the like moving pieces, which is and then so Locutus cool.
is cool after that.
He's like, okay. And I love that Picard initiates contact with Data by like gently holding his wrist. And Troy was like, this is Picard. That's him. Like, this is not Locutus. And they're like, okay, well, can we plant this command into the collective consciousness? Like, how do we plant a root command?
Yeah. And which command should it be? Because Data knows how to put it in, but like, can we get through all the security levels? And even if we do, what should we say? And they're like, just try to, shut them down, turn it off, make
power down systems.
Go away. Yeah. Power down
systems,
weapons. Turn off weapons. Something like that. And like all of that is a no-go. And they are getting very close to being blown out of the sky.
Yes.
And they've got no weapons left and everything looks hopeless. And Riker's just like, F this, fly the ship. Wesley. Yes. Oh yeah. That's where Wesley was. He was flying the ship. Wesley, plot a course, just like a collision course. We're just going to take the Enterprise straight through the heart of the cube and both of us will die right here.
Mm-hmm.
And Wesley's all like,
that's the ballsy captain move that we wanted. This was the question in episode 1 was, can Riker make the hard decisions? And episode 2 answered that time and time again. And I freaking love it. And we never question that again in TNG because he's totally proved it. Yeah. And they're right about to order the jump to warp, and Data comes back in, and Picard keeps saying sleep over and over. And Data understands because Crusher, being the doctor, is like, he's so tired. And he's like, yes, but I feel like there's kind of more to this. And he's like, it turns out that the regenerative sleep command is this very low priority subsection of the root command of the Borg. And so he's able to just type in the word sleep. And all of a sudden, now the Borg have busted out their fucking hole cutting laser again, because they keep trying to cut holes into ships for some reason. They already know, like, they have the captain of the flagship. You don't need to like take a piece of a ship to analyze it to like whatever, but they're doing that. They're cutting holes left and right. And suddenly everything just gets deadly
quiet.
Still. Yeah. And they're like, hello? And Data's like, I put them to sleep. And they beam aboard. You know, we have this away team that beams aboard the cube, and they're like, the Borg are all regenerating, but there's something going on. Like the subcommand malfunction has initiated a self-destruct. So we need to get the hell out of here as quickly as we can. And they jump away from the cube at warp speed. And this cube self-destructs in just the most spectacular manner while it's orbiting right above Earth. Like, it is totally made it there. Which, by the way, I thought that Borg cube is gigantic compared to any other ship, but it is tiny compared to the planet. Don't they have like bigger cannons and things that can just absolutely like smash that thing to oblivion? Like, don't they have it? I
just don't think any weapons work against the Borg because they adapt too quickly. Like, unless you can fire exactly one weapon that destroys them in one shot, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I was just sort of picturing like in Star Wars on Hoth, you know, they've got like on the ice planet, the AT-AT walkers are like walking across the ice, and like on the ground, they've got those gigantic like laser cannons that they're like blasting away. And I was like, it's got to be something like that.
I feel like the Earth is severely lacking in laser cannons. Like whenever we visit San Francisco,
a general.
We don't see them. There's just like, yes, they just feel very safe and comfortable, right?
Yeah, everybody's like, we're very pacifist.
Who's going to attack Earth? They have a whole freaking federation of like a bajillion planets and systems. Who's going to attack Earth?
Like, You're right.
Why would they need cannons? That's what the ships are for.
Right.
That's what the 40 freaking ships in the Armada were for.
Yeah. Now all they have is just the Mars perimeter defense, like little teeny ships. Yeah,
they're done.
That's it. So the Enterprise moves away in time for the cube to self-destruct. And when that happens, the connection is severed flaccutus, and Picard comes back. And it is just such a relief. I've seen this episode 100 times. And even every time I'm like, there it is. There he is. He's back. And he's like, I feel almost human with a slight headache, you know. Now this is some serious PTSD.
Seriously. Yeah.
And as we see the Enterprise orbiting Earth, I love seeing this, like, Picard, clearly like some time has passed, because by the way, Beverly is like, we can get those like implants out of you lickety split. It's just a simple matter of microsurgery. Okay, Beverly. And like, you'll be fine. And I love that we see these like patches, like almost like futuristic band-aids, like where his implants were, that kind of outline. I was like, those are super cool.
That was super cool. Yeah. So it's sometime in the future where some time has passed. Things have kind of calmed down a bit. And we see that Picard is back to being captain. Riker's back to being first officer. Shelby's off to refit the fleet because, 40 ships were lost. So now we need to make 40 more ships, or maybe more. And it kind
of more, I'm guessing, because like if one cube took that out, like 2 cubes just done. Yeah,
I don't know. Her ambitions are to get it all back the way it was in just a year, which is amazing, because who knows how long it takes to build something like the Enterprise. I can imagine a very long time. Plus those ships were not all like, whatever Galaxy class or something. There was all kinds of ships, and now they're all gone. And it's almost kind of like all's well that ends well. But as we see everybody filter out, Picard kind of stands up and looks out his window and is just kind of pondering what all he's been through. And I immediately was like, Troy, where are you, Troy? Or like Guinan or something.
Yes.
Cause I'm like, and you actually, I guess I kind of appreciate this. You see this forevermore, whenever they mention Locutus, just this like shame and guilt in Picard for what he did, because he remembered everything he did.
He remembers everything.
And it's like the Borg really victimized him. They victimized him twice. They kidnapped him. They assimilated him. They forced him to kill thousands of people. And now that he's no longer a Borg, he has to relive that and the guilt that he would not have had guilt if he was a Borg, because there's nothing to be guilty about. But now he has to live with feeling like that was his choice when it wasn't, you know, which is like,
I thought that subtle change in his face is a testament to Patrick Stewart's acting ability.
Totally.
Because he goes to have a sip of his Earl Grey and then he has this haunted look on his face, like a deep struggle with this trauma that he's experienced. And, you know, as we learn later in other Star Trek shows and even in other episodes of TNG, there are a lot of people who blame him for what happened to like friends and family and loved ones who all died at Wolf 359. And I feel like that's just extremely unfair. It's a, you know, if your husband or wife, or what we see in pilot episode of Deep Space Nine, like Captain Sisko loses his wife, like in Wolf 359, and he kind of holds it forever against Picard. And it's like, man, like it's natural to have that feeling, but also like you would have done the exact same thing if you were in that position. Like if you didn't have a choice. Yeah. If you were assimilated, that's what you would have done. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I love that he goes to this window of his ready room and he looks out on Earth. And I feel like in that moment, he's really looking down on the planet and like reflecting just how close he had come to being like the instrument of demise of humanity. It's like looking over this planet you almost destroyed. And I don't know if you caught this. This was like the second little catch I got with the Borg. In this final panning shot of the Enterprise kind of like in orbit around the Earth, we see the Enterprise and it's making its little sound like as it flies away. And we hear just the tiniest echo of the Borg cube sound. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was so haunting. And I was like, maybe I'm hearing things. I went back and replayed it like 3 or 4 times. And it's like in the last 1 second of the show where it was like ambient sound and then just this tiny little twist. And I was like, ooh, that is so good. Because it's like this threat that like they can come back and they probably will come back. Yeah.
So much scarier than the Romulans or the Cardassians being like, we'll be back, or, you know, with their intrigue and spy games.
Yeah. You're like, okay.
Yeah. This is like, you know, you killed one, but this is just one. And you know they're going to be back, and you don't know when. More. You don't know how many. You don't know if they're on their way right now. And the other thing that I thought was cool that we skipped, because I forgot until right now, is that Hansen, back when he was alive, he said, we've called in the Klingons.
I noticed that as well. And I thought about that. And I was like, I didn't see any Klingon warbirds like in the destruction.
Yeah. Then I also been in the wreckage.
Yeah. And I also wondered too, do we ever see Borg that are Klingons that have been assimilated?
I don't remember in TNG. So we'll see as we go on. I think so, because there's a Borg cube that does get like freed from the Borg. And then you see that a whole bunch of Alpha Quadrant races that now.
Okay. Yeah. Because the Borg all look the same. They're all just variations on like ghost white skin and like cybernetic implants. But I was like, if you saw like Romulan or Vulcan or Klingon Borg, like that,
you wouldn't be able to tell.
Well, I feel like forehead ridges or something like.
No, all that stuff gets modified so that they all look the same. But when they are freed from the collective and start regaining their individuality, all that stuff kind of, not all of it, but a lot of it starts to come back. Like their hair starts to grow back. The skin coloring comes back. The like, you know, different things that the Borg modified comes back. And they try to, they actually do this in Voyager where a whole cube like malfunctions and they all get disconnected from the hive mind. Cool. But they're right next to this planet. So they all kind of beam down to the planet. And then they realize that they're from different races. And some of them just go to war. Like they just start warring against the other ones. So a whole other ones like have this little like bunker where they're all trying to work together and be cooperative. The other ones want to kill everybody.
Oh my God.
It's this like race to the finish. It's really good. But they kind of like start dismantling all their cybernetics. They start taking out the implants, and you see they're like, then
different
you start seeing their ridges and their hair and their like clothes and all the things that make them. But when they're in Borg mode, they just all look exactly the same. Like
that is so cool and so
it's
scary.
Really cool. So and then he was even like, so he was like, yeah, we called in the Klingons. We were even thinking about calling in the Romulans. Like we're just gonna ask everybody to help us out. And it was when you see this graveyard, you're like, man,
Oh my God.
that wasn't going to help. Like, even if you called in
nothing.
everybody,
if you called in 100 more ships, it wouldn't have done anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's where this episode ends. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap?
I think this was a really great conclusion. I think the two-parters that we see moving forward have nothing on this. Like, they're just not as captivating, shocking, alluring, I don't know, engaging. But they're good. They're good. And I do have to say that as much as I enjoyed this episode, I equally did not enjoy the next episode. So I'm a little bummed that we're going from such a high note to such a low note.
Yes, I agree with you. Next week's episode is season 4, episode 2, Family. It was originally written to be a 3-part episode with Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2 and Family to be the conclusion, but it really fell flat. So they ended up just making it 1 and 2. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I'll mention it again. Shereese and I have been watching Lower Decks on Paramount Plus. It's the animated Star Trek series, which we originally were like, we're not going to watch it. So if it's good, let us know. And we love it. It's a complete love letter to TNG in particular, but also shout outs, I think, to like other shows, Star Treks. Yeah. But it is supposed to take place at the same time in the timeline as the Enterprise is doing all this stuff. So at one point, one of the characters is kind of elbowing another character being like, hey, is it true that Wolf 359 was an inside job? I thought was so brilliant. Just so great.
Funny and sad.
Funny and sad, which a lot of humor is. It's funny and sad. But honestly, such a great episode, such a wonderful conclusion to this like intense cliffhanger. One of my favorite Borg episodes ever. I will say right up here with my favorite Borg episodes is the episode I, Borg, where Hugh becomes like his own identity.
An individual.
Oh my God, it's just so sad.
And I will tell you, Hugh does come back in Picard.
Yeah.
And
does he?
just,
oh my gosh.
It's just everything. He's like the Borg liaison with the Romulans. It's like a whole thing. But Borg does come back and he's a grown-up.
I know we do see him. I do know that we see him in other episodes, and that is like the junction of like this different evolution of Borg, which is so cool. But anyway, this episode was amazing. I had so much fun breaking this down with you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.